You're listening to the Turn Autism Around podcast, episode number 156. This is our last episode of 2021, and I want to first start off by wishing you a happy holiday and a happy new year, which is coming up very soon. As you know, if you've been listening to my podcast since 2019, for 3 years now, the goal of my autism podcast is to empower both parents and professionals to better help kids with autism and toddlers with signs of autism. And like I said, if you've been listening for a long time, since 2019, when I first started this podcast, I want to thank you for continuing to listen and to support my work. There are 2 other top 10 episodes. In 2019, we did a top 10 episode of my autism podcast episodes. And also in 2020, we can link those in the show notes. So if you're just starting out with me, you may want to go to those 2 podcasts and listen to this one and catch yourself up on the best of the best, or at least from my opinion. It is really hard to pick out the top 10 out of over 50 that I've done this year. If you have been listening for a while but have never written a podcast review, I would love it if you would post that on Apple Podcasts or wherever you are listening. And if you want to tell me about your success you're having from my podcast, my books, my online courses, or any information that you've gotten from me over the years, I would love it if you fill out a short survey at marybarbera.com/success. In the past, we have chosen people for hot seats and given out a few prizes too for those who have shared success. Again, that's marybarbera.com/success. So the top 10 autism podcast episodes for 2021 are listed numerically in order of when they first aired. So I think the first one was aired in February. And so it's not by order of preference. It's, like I said, very hard to narrow down, but here are my top picks for 2021. The first one is episode number 114, which was Diagnosing Autism, an interview with developmental pediatrician Dr. Cheryl Tierney Avis. And I have known Dr. Tierney for years, potentially probably a decade or more. Dr. Tierney read my draft book before it came out, and on her podcast episode, or shortly around that time, she did write a blurb for the book. And she also, through a grant from Hershey Medical Center, she purchased 100 copies of the book through a bulk order. And we can link that in the show notes too, if you want to consider buying my Turn Autism Around book in bulk. She routinely has in the past given out the Verbal Behavior Approach book to parents, and now she's giving out the Turn Autism Around approach book out. Some things I learned in episode number 114 from Dr. Tierney, which kind of were surprising, is there are only about 700 developmental pediatricians in the whole United States, which was shocking and kind of makes sense where we're having such a problem getting kids evaluated and diagnosed. I didn't realize, but Dr. Tierney is a sleep expert, actually did some work in her fellowship with Dr. Ferber, who is known for his sleep techniques. There is a chapter in the Turn Autism Around book on sleep, so we talked about that sleep chapter. And we also talked about how parents that are trying to get their kids to sleep and using the cry it out method, that is never a good idea, according to Dr. Tierney. She said it is an outdated technique and not helpful for children, and that there are better ways to get children sleeping independently that don't lead to crying it out, aversion, which is one of the reasons she liked my book so much, and the chapter on sleep is because I have a totally child-friendly approach. So that is our first of the top 10. Let's move on to our second episode from the top 10. And that is episode number 116 with Autism Dad Advice, and when I interviewed my husband, Dr. Charles Barbera. This episode was a great discussion between both Charles and I, and how our views have changed, how our life has changed. Lucas is now 25 years of age, so we were, first-time parents, and kind of how we evolved with autism and how we have worked together to create the future we all want, and the future we want for Lucas, the future we want for ourselves, and for our other typically developing son, Spencer. So during the interview, Charles and I talked about how to handle things when one spouse is in denial, like I was, when he first mentioned the possibility of autism. He said in his episode, I asked him, how do you get somebody out of denial? Like, I was in denial for over a year, and he didn't get me out of denial. I wish he would have. We would have gotten to treatment sooner, but, we were navigating the whole autism world. But he said that he doesn't ever want to say, he didn't want to say to me, and he wouldn't recommend, if one spouse is in denial, that you say, you're wrong, it's definitely autism, or you're wrong, it's definitely not autism. And, going with that, I'm right and you're wrong. Instead of that, he encourages spouses to gently lead to the truth and being there for them when they come to the same conclusion. So maybe instead of focusing on it's autism, he focused on, well, let's get a speech evaluation. Let's get speech therapy. Let's put him in toddler preschool. Let's, now the toddler preschool, when the director called us in and the teacher called us in, okay, now we have experts, outsiders who are noting some delays. Charles also, in his episode, which I think was really good, it's back here in the video studio. So like my episode, the very top pick from 2020 was my interview with Spencer, my typically developing son, and is right back here in the video studio that I have in my house. And so Charles and I were kind of going back and forth. And I asked Charlie, you were so pessimistic on the drive home from the hospital. You were saying things like, he'll never go to college, he'll never get married, he'll never, learn to drive. And I was crying, upset, telling him, don't say those things. And that was very pessimistic. He was right. Lucas has not, will never drive or go to college or get married. But there are a lot of kids that I've known personally through the autism world, and a lot of my clients who are driving and going to college. None of them are married yet that I know of, but I do know other autistic adults that are married and have a wonderful life. So I pointed that out, and he was kind of embarrassed by his pessimistic outlook after receiving Lucas's diagnosis. And he realizes now that all you really want is for your kids to be happy, and Lucas is very happy. So I think the overall advice from Charles was for dads who have a child who's newly diagnosed to pay attention to the milestones and be proud of your kids as they achieve milestones, even if they're delayed. It might look differently than you thought, but you need to celebrate the milestones and try to keep, your family intact, and try to really tackle it head on as a couple if you are in a two-parent house. So I thought that was a great episode. The next episode was the very next week, episode number 117. It's my interview with Dr. Temple Grandin on how to turn autism around. The Temple, this show, 117, came out on March 30th, 2021, which was the exact same date that my book, Turn Autism Around, came out. And Temple Grandin wrote the foreword for my Turn Autism Around book. So this interview that I did, that we played and aired on the date my book came out, was actually recorded a few months before that. And it was really great to work with Temple, to, contact her and to talk on the phone. We talked on the phone 3 separate times as she wrote the foreword for my book. It's just been an absolute honor to get to know her better. And we had 2 episodes with her in 2021. We had this episode, number 117, and then we did an episode with Temple and a co-author for her new book in the fall of 2021. But this episode, which aired on March 30th, is really special because Temple discusses how her mother was her first and best teacher and advocate, much like my message to parents about how they need to become their child's best teacher and advocate. Temple also talks about her biggest concern for children now is the long wait list to be diagnosed, and then again, awaiting for services. And this is why she agreed to write the foreword for my new book. When she found out that it really was targeting very young children, even before the diagnosis and right after, she became interested and said, yes, I want to write it, because she has gone lecturing all over the world. And she often gets questions from parents about very young children. Temple herself was very severe at 2 and 3. Her mother was told to institutionalize Temple, and the mother really gave it her all, hired a nanny to keep her engaged, had her in a special school in somebody's basement. We're working with other kids with Down syndrome, and really focusing on her talents, her love of animals, her love of art. And it's just a really great episode. It's actually one of our highest downloaded shows as well. So that is 117 with Dr. Temple Grandin. And we're going to put all of these in the show notes, all of these links. So if you're driving or exercising and you're like, I can't remember all of those, just search for Mary Autism Top 10 2021. It should come up. Or if you can just remember one link, marybarbera.com/156. That'll have all the show notes listed on the same page. Okay, our next top 10 is number 4, and that is episode number 132, entitled ABA Therapy, 4 Myths and Truths. This was a solo show that I felt was important to do because as of late, especially in the past 6 months to a year, there has been a lot of ABA controversy. And so I've done several shows, including the solo show where I talk about the 4 myths and truths. I've also done other shows with other behavior analysts, and we'll talk about some of those other shows in a minute. But in the episode on the 4 myths and truths of ABA, I talk about how I truly believe that my specific ABA approach, which uses Skinner's analysis of verbal behavior, and my Turn Autism Around approach, is child-friendly. And it is so important to get into the hands of parents and professionals, because not only does ABA and my approach to ABA specifically work to increase talking, decrease tantrums, solve picky eating, sleep, potty training problems, and a variety of other things. It also sets up healthy relationships for parents and professionals with children who need ABA. We cover some of the controversy, and I really am glad that I'm really coming out and standing behind ABA. Although in the episode, I do say that all ABA, all the treatment packages for ABA, some of them are not producing really good outcomes. The children are not progressing. They're continuing to have major problem behaviors. They're continuing not to have communication skills, not to be potty trained. And so if you are getting ABA or you're providing ABA as a professional and it's not working, I would really urge you to come into my world a little bit more deeply. Read my book, attend a free online workshop, consider joining my online course and community. There is a better way. It is through ABA, but it's through really incorporating a lot of the newer ABA strategies that I embrace. Number 5 on our list is episode number 138, Teaching Toddlers with Autism Using the Turn Autism Around approach. It is hot seat number 3 with a mom named Lauren. So in the past, I have done 3 hot seats so far. And this hot seat, 138, was with Lauren. And in this episode, what's great about the hot seats, and I plan to do more of these hot seats in 2022. What's great about the hot seats are these moms, actually, Lauren from episode 138, and I did hot seat number 2 this year as well with Swathina. That was episode number 134. And Swathina's was a child who's an intermediate learner, but Lauren's child is just 3 years old diagnosed with severe autism. In both of those episodes, though, both of the hot seats from this year, I got the information ahead of time. The mom sent me the 1-page assessment form from the book and my courses, the 1-page plan. They sent me the self-care checklist. Swathina sent me the intraverbal subtest. And so I really went through step by step of how we would look at the whole picture, both for Lauren's child as well as for Swathina's child. They were both girls, actually. And we went through and I showed them what I thought should be the priorities. We discussed each child's strengths and needs, and we created an appropriate plan. That is something that for the hot seats, I would really look at the show notes carefully, because these moms are incredible. They gave us permission to upload their exact filled out, completed assessment forms and planning forms. And it's so important for parents and professionals to kind of see the guide and see how things can be turned around, no matter if you have an early learner like Lauren's little girl, or if you have an intermediate learner, meaning VB-MAP level 2 and 3, which was Swathina's child. In both of these hot seat calls, we also discuss the importance of working collaboratively with any professionals that you may have in your child's life. So that episode number 138, is really one that you should watch. Before we leave the hot seats, I just wanted to tell you, in addition to the data sheets, which you can see, and kind of how I filter everything through the 4-step Turn Autism Around approach. Both Lauren from 138 and Swathina from 134 were podcast listeners to start with. And then they both joined our online courses and community. And at some point, we're asking good questions and kind of at a crossroads in some ways. And so I invited them to do the podcast hot seats. I do plan to do more hot seats in 2022. So if you want to apply for a hot seat, first read my Turn Autism Around approach book or take at least one of my courses, then apply at marybarbera.com/success. Okay, number 6 on our list of the top 10 is episode number 144. Does my toddler have autism, or is it a speech delay due to COVID isolation? This is an interview with Rachel, who was very pregnant. She was also in my studio. Rachel actually has worked for my company for a while, and she's worked with Lucas in the past. And she was very pregnant at this interview, and she has had her second baby boy. But in this episode, Rachel and I discuss COVID isolation and the effect it had on her young child, Everett. And when we think about like the episode I did recently, in the past year with Dr. Catherine Lord, she talks all about how COVID isolation has really just clogged up the system more, made people wait more. It's hard to diagnose when everybody's face is covered with masks and shields and the child won't tolerate it. And so all kinds of problems. But little Everett was having a speech delay. It was, and Rachel, who was working with me, used all the methods from my courses and read my book on draft and used all of the techniques with her typically developing toddler. Now, Everett was scoring. We did an MChat, which I did a video blog on the MChat. We can link that in the show notes. He was scoring fine in terms of autism, but he definitely had a speech delay. And she really feels like it was a lack of exposure to typical peers, lack of exposure to grocery stores and to library circle time and all the kind of things that Rachel, as a special education teacher by training, would have done with her son. But you know, if you think about the kids that are 2 and 3 and 4, they've spent, you know, all or most of their life or half of their life in isolation. And this can really look like delays. It could possibly look like autism too. So since the airing of the episode, Everett has had communication delays removed from his paperwork at the pediatrician's office and then now has met or exceeded all of the CDC milestones for his age group. As I said, Rachel just had her second son named Ronan. So in the episode with Rachel, we discussed how using my methods such as the shush and give procedure, expanding Everett's vocabulary by using the shoebox program and potato head, desensitization techniques. For all of a sudden, Everett got weird around toothbrushing. And so she was able to use the desensitization techniques in chapter 13 of my book and a bonus video within my courses. And also how she was preventing problem behaviors, and teaching her husband also how to use these techniques so that Everett would be calm and happy and gain the skills both in speech and socialization. And finally, we discussed how to pick the right daycare or preschool for your child and what to look for when searching for care. Okay, number 7 on our list of the top 10 is episode number 149, which was my autism journey with Lucas. Now, episode 149 is a one to watch instead of just listen to, in my opinion. So you can always find the episode by marybarbera.com/149. This episode was very different than most as I highlighted specific moments from my journey with Lucas, with pictures, with posts. It was all part of a 25-day autism social media challenge that I did. Kate from Finding Cooper's Voice, who was on episode number 70, years ago, probably in 2020, she started this 25-day challenge, and we would get a prompt every day, like post a picture of your child with an animal, or post a picture of you when you were pretending like everything was okay, but it really wasn't, and write about it. So we posted a picture and wrote about it. And then I put all of these pictures in a photo album on my Facebook business page. And then I decided to kind of go through them one by one. And that's episode number 149, which I received a lot of really good feedback for that one. Again, it's definitely one you want to watch instead of listen to. Okay, number 8 on our list of the top 10 is episode number 150. This is an autism success story, and it's with Melissa, who is part of a military family. Her and her husband were, and her husband still is, in the military, and they were living in Japan overseas with her 3 young boys, and her middle son started showing signs of autism. Her husband was deployed, and she was really struggling to manage the needs of all three boys in a foreign country. And then once he was diagnosed with autism, they decided to move back to the United States to get care. But how they navigated getting a diagnosis and setting up services, moving internationally with three little boys, including one with autism. We discussed her success using my online course to turn autism around in terms of safety, in terms of communication, and reduction of problem behaviors while she was still in Japan alone. And then as she moved back and found a BCBA who has known me for years and has been a follower of my work. We discussed how to set up services like ABA with like-minded providers who know how to implement the verbal behavior programming that I talk about in my first book, as well as the Turn Autism Around approach, which I talk about in my second. Okay, we're coming down to the wire. My number 9 pick is episode number 151 with Armando Bernal. And this one is on his journey as a BCBA therapist with autism. So it was a really special episode. I've gotten a lot of great feedback. I was able to connect with Armando, who he was diagnosed with autism at the age of 3. And his mother was told that she should teach him sign language because he wasn't probably going to talk. And now Armando is fully conversational. He has a master's degree. He is a board certified behavior analyst and a special education teacher. He is engaged to be married. He is just a delight. And he has his own podcast now. So he posted about his own podcast. And I have interviewed at least 5, if not more, autistic adults. I've interviewed dozens of board certified behavior analysts, but I've never interviewed both an autistic person who's also a BCBA. And it was a great, great interview where Armando shared his unique perspective on ABA. We talked about the controversy, what he says when people say ABA is abuse. I also enjoyed getting to discuss how he feels when that parents should be so involved in their child's therapy and invites them to come watch whenever they would like. I also say that parents should have access to see what is happening during therapy, if at all possible. We discussed topics like how he found out that he had autism and how much he disclosed that when he was in high school and college, and how he struggled socially and how he feels like he still does struggle at times, as well as just navigating work and life, and now he has a fiance. One of my favorite lines from this episode with Armando was when he said that his fiance knows that she got him a great present when he flaps his hands. He was just a sweet guy. So 151 is the episode with Armando. And our final top 10 episode is number 152 with Amanda DeLuca and Kirby Morgan, how to advocate for your child with autism in an IEP meeting. In this episode with Amanda and Kirby, we discussed the importance of an IEP and an IFSP, which comes before an IEP if your child needs services before the age of 3. We also discuss how important it is for parents to have a seat at the table for their IEP, the fact that they can request a draft to the IEP, that they don't have to sign anything on the day of the IEP meeting. We talk about the list of questions in the first couple pages of the IEP, in terms of, does your child have communication needs? Of course, that's going to be checked yes. Is your child blind? In most cases, no. But there is another question that comes up a lot. Does your child have behaviors that impede his learning or the learning of others? And I've been through many, many IEP meetings, as well as, teaching about IEPs. And that question, does the child have behaviors that impede his learning or the learning of others? Almost in all situations, that should be marked yes. And that would trigger more behavioral support in school, more behavioral assessment to see what kind of support is needed. So we talk about even the checking the little box. This episode is just filled with important information for both parents and professionals, whether you are preparing for your first IEP meeting or your 10th. We talk all about how we need to collaborate as a team as you really keep the bar very high for your child. So thanks for listening to this very special episode of my top 10 favorite episodes from 2021. Don't forget, I would love it if you would leave a podcast review if you can. I'd also love to hear about your success, and I hope to read anything you want to tell me about how my work may have helped you at marybarbera.com/success. I wish you a very happy new year in 2022, and I will be starting right with the first Tuesday of 2022 for year number 4 coming up for the Turn Autism Around podcast. Thanks so much and have a good one.